Hola guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here, and I am here to talk to you about The X-Files Season 8. This is going to be a very interesting season for me to talk about because I have spent hours on this channel talking about how much I hate this series, how the character interactions don't make any sense with the premise that we are given, how the stories that we are given are contradictory amongst themselves, and how they don't make any sense even if they weren't contradicting themselves. Basically, this show is just a big, hot, steaming pile of mess. And a lot of people who consider themselves fans of this show, who really like this series, they like the first 5 to 6 seasons of the show. I've seen people who are really big fans of the series, they say they like the earlier seasons quite a bit more than the later seasons. Why is this interesting, you may ask? Because this season, I feel like I've kind of enjoyed it more than a lot of the seasons of this series so far. As I briefly mentioned at the end of my review of Season 7, Mulder is abducted at the end of that season. It just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like in the second to last episode of that season, you wouldn't have any idea that Mulder is going to be abducted, and then in the last 5 minutes of Season 7, it's like, oh, by the way, Mulder gets abducted by aliens. And it's weird, it comes out of nowhere, and then this season deals with the aftermath of that. We get a new agent played by Robert Patrick, who was the Liquid Terminator from Terminator 2. He is John Doggett, and he is assigned, he is an agent within the Bureau, and he is assigned to search for Mulder. And then after some weird stuff goes on with the alien bounty hunter, who is finally killed, Doggett is assigned to the X-Files with Scully. And there were two ways they could have gone about this. Number one, they could have had Agent Doggett be the new Mulder. He could have been Spooky Doggett, who we've never heard of in 7 years of the show, and suddenly he comes in and he says, hey, I also believe in aliens and ghosts and stuff like that. And now that Mulder's gone, you're going to have to bounce your skepticism off of me. They could have done that, which would have been extremely stupid. And fortunately, they went in the other direction. They said, okay, Doggett is also a skeptic. He doesn't believe in any of this stuff. And over the course of 7 years, Scully has went from being a skeptic to a reluctant believer. And I really like the way they played that. Now, it is a little bit stupid that, say, 3 episodes before the end of Season 7, Scully was still saying, well, now that's impossible, there's no such thing as werewolves or ghosts or vampires or whatever it was that they were dealing with. She was still saying, that's impossible, I'm still a skeptic. And then, now that Mulder's gone, she's basically saying, okay, I believe now. I'm the one who is weird. I'm Spooky Scully, and now I've got a new skeptic guy who's going to be the new Scully or whatever. I feel like it would have been better if this series had slowly built up Scully as eventually coming to accept all this stuff. And I don't think they did a good enough job with that, because even, seasons 5, 6, and 7, she was still being a skeptic, shooting down Mulder's theories and stuff when she had spent 5, 6, 7 years seeing the paranormal and knowing that it exists. She sees this stuff and it's irrefutable. There's no way that she can say, oh, well, that doesn't exist, except that she still says that doesn't exist. And I feel like if they had slowly turned her into more of a Mulder type character, more of a believer who maybe has more of a reliance on hard science than Mulder does, then this season would have felt more rewarding, where suddenly she becomes the Mulder type and Doggett becomes the new Scully. I feel like this transition would have worked a lot better if they had done that. But I really did like the idea of, we've got this new guy and he doesn't believe in the paranormal, because at least at first it becomes more believable than the last 7 years of this show. When Robert Patrick, I keep calling him that, when Agent Doggett comes on, he hasn't seen vampires, ghosts, and aliens and all this stuff that Scully has seen. So it actually makes a lot of sense for him to say, hold on a second, there's no such thing as shapeshifters. And then at the end of the episode, he sees shapeshifters, and by that point, he starts acting like Scully of old, and he says, hold on a second, there's no such thing as shapeshifters, even though he's already seen a shapeshifter. And then he sees a man-bat, and he sees all this stuff, and then he still tries to be a skeptic and says he doesn't believe in any of this. But I really like the character of Agent Doggett. They didn't go about just trying to make another character who is exactly like Mulder, because the actor David Duchovny was not going to be in the show anymore. They didn't just take a Mulder 2.0 and then take some story ideas that they had for Mulder and then throw them on this guy. They actually went about creating a new character. He has a slightly different backstory than Mulder. Mulder spent, 6 or 7 years trying to find his long-lost sister. This guy, Doggett, he has a son who died. And we don't actually get a whole lot of information on his son. I feel like this is something that if the show had lasted, say, 4 or 5 more years, we probably would have gotten some information on who killed his son, why did his son die, stuff like that. In this season, we only get 2 episodes that even kind of hint on that. And one episode, all we see is him looking at a picture of a kid, and we're left to assume, okay, that's his son. And then in another episode, we're told that he worked with another agent in the Bureau, and I'll get to her in a minute, on the investigation of his son's death, but we never actually find out who killed his son or what all that was about. And as far as I know, these characters don't even know who killed his son. So he's kind of sort of got a similar backstory to Mulder. Not any of the alien abduction stuff. He's just got, the tragic, a family member of his is gone, kind of like Mulder. But he is a different kind of character. He's very hard, sort of got that military vibe to him, even though he's never been in a military. He was a cop and then became an agent, but he's kind of got that hard-nosed, gruff attitude about him, and he's very different from Mulder, and I like that they went in that direction with him. I'm glad that they didn't try to just make another guy be exactly like Mulder. And speaking of Mulder, I am not sure why David Duchovny left the series. I've heard some conflicting reports. One person said that he actually sued the series because he didn't feel like he was making enough money, and then he won the lawsuit. I looked that up, and I have seen absolutely no evidence of anything like that at all, and it doesn't make any sense that he would get in a lawsuit with the series because about halfway into the season, spoiler, Mulder comes back, and then he's in several episodes of this season and a few episodes of the next season. So it doesn't really make any sense that he would be in a lawsuit with the series because it seems like he still had kind of a benevolent relationship with the show, and presumably he left for the same reason everyone leaves TV, because he wanted to pursue a film in movies, which ultimately didn't work out for him as well as it probably would have if he had stayed with the X-Files. But he, of course, at the end of season 7, Mulder is abducted by aliens, and then Doggett is assigned to the X-Files, and their job is to find Mulder. And then they spend the first half of the season not actually looking for Mulder, and then about halfway into the season, Scully says they've been spending all this time looking for a break. And I said, really? Because it doesn't seem like you guys have been looking for Mulder at all. It seems like you guys have just been doing typical X-Files stuff, fighting man-bats or stuff like that. But anyway, Mulder is dropped back on Earth, and then we get, frankly, the second half of this season is kind of where things start to lose me a little bit, because Mulder is back, but he's not fully part of the X-Files anymore, because Agent Kirsch, who was introduced a couple of years ago, it was right after the movie came out, Agent Kirsch is the guy who basically, he's not a bad guy, he's not involved with the conspiracy or anything like that, but he does not like Mulder or Scully, he does not like the X-Files, and he basically wants it all shut down. And we're led to believe that he basically has an ulterior motive for putting Doggett on the X-Files, like he believes that, or he doesn't think that Doggett is going to be successful in finding Mulder, and so he's kind of setting him up for failure, and then when he doesn't find Mulder, then he says, okay, fine, as punishment, you're staying on the X-Files. That's kind of what we're led to believe, but we don't really have a whole lot of information on Kirsch this season, just that every time he's on screen, he's yelling at one of our characters, either Scully or Doggett or Agent Skinner, but we don't really get a whole lot on his motivations, on why he wants to shut down the X-Files, or at the very end of this season, why he's talking to 2 of the characters who are revealed to be bad guys working for the aliens, why he's talking with them. We don't really get anything about this guy. I don't know if we'll get anything about him in the final season, but we'll see. But about halfway into the show, Mulder comes back, and at that point, Kirsch is like, okay, Mulder's back, and he wants to be part of the X-Files again, but I'm going to say no, because Agent Doggett and Agent Scully have done a much better job of finding conclusions and solutions to these X-Files than Scully and Mulder have. And I call baloney on that, because I feel like Doggett and Scully have had just as many what happened, we don't really know, but we're going to file a report on it anyway moments as Scully and Mulder. Or not as many, because they were only together for half a season when Mulder came back, whereas Scully and Mulder were together for 7 years, but I feel like Doggett and Scully, they didn't have any episode where it was a flat-out victory and they 100% knew this is what was going on. They had just as many, I don't know what's going on, this is kind of left hanging in the air at the end of the episode. They had just as many of those as Mulder and Scully did, say, halfway through season 1. So the idea of, we're not going to let Mulder back in the X-Files because Doggett is a better investigator than Mulder, that's a little bit weird. Even if if we know that Mulder's not very good at investigating, he'll go somewhere and he'll just assume, okay, I think that this week it's the Loch Ness Monster. And then it ends up being the Loch Ness Monster, even though he doesn't have any evidence to back that up or any reason at all to believe that other than he wants to believe. But Mulder, basically, from that point on, he will kind of put his nose into the FBI business, even though he's not really an FBI agent anymore. I'm not sure if he was flat out fired or if he just wasn't allowed back on the X-Files, but he's kind of poking his nose into some X-Files business, and then eventually he gets fired because he takes responsibility for this giant oil rig blowing up because he was horning in on Doggett's case. And that was 100% Mulder's fault. There's absolutely no way that Doggett was to blame for that. And it's at this point, Mulder basically really hates Doggett because Doggett is on the X-Files and Mulder isn't anymore. And also you kind of get the sense that he is jealous of Doggett's relationship with Scully. And he doesn't really have a relationship with Scully because anytime Scully is talking to Mulder, she just calls him Mulder. Anytime she's talking to Doggett, she calls him Special Agent Doggett or Agent Doggett. She never calls him John or even Doggett. You don't really get the sense that these two are friends. They're partners, and they're professional partners, at least by the end of the season, but you don't get the feeling that there's anything else going on there. But Mulder seems to be jealous anyway. And eventually Mulder is 100% out of the Bureau. He is fired, and by that point, Scully is also dealing with a pregnancy this entire season. I haven't even gotten to that yet. At the very end of season 7, Scully tells Skinner that she's pregnant. And this makes absolutely no sense because we were told that Scully was 100% barren, that she could not have kids. And we were told about halfway into this season that she actually had a surrogate pregnancy done, I guess. So maybe it's not her egg. We're not really sure because in the flashback episode that we get in this season where we see her trying to have a kid, talking to doctors about surrogacy and stuff like that, it kind of leads us to believe that she does still have eggs. But we were told earlier in the series that she did not have any more eggs left and that she was completely unable to have kids. And that's never really addressed. Just, hey, it's really weird and unusual that she's pregnant, and that shouldn't be possible, but it's happening. And they don't actually explain why it's happening. And for the longest part of this season, the audience and everyone in the show was kind of thinking that this was going to turn out to be an alien baby. And I was just rolling my eyes throughout that whole subplot because I did not want the show to do alien babies. That was the one thing that I did not want them to do. And it's weird because, like, there's this clinic where these evil doctors who are experimenting on Scully, they have these alien babies, and we see alien babies being born and stuff like that. But then we're told at the end of the season, no, it's not an alien baby. It's actually part of this super soldier project, and the chip that's in the back of Scully's neck somehow was able to create this super soldier baby. And so I guess a chip in the back of her neck that was put in there, like in season 2, somehow that impregnated her at the end of season 7. I don't know. But anyway, so somehow this baby is going to be born, and it has, like, no human frailties at all. It's basically like the super babies from Star Trek in the Eugenics Wars, like Khan. It's basically like that, or so we're told. And basically every character in this series who is not Mulder, Kirsch, Doggett, or Skinner, basically every character in this series is trying to make sure that this baby is born for sinister purposes. And it's really weird. Nobody will actually reveal why they want the baby born, other than it's a really special baby. But it ends up, it's not an alien baby, it's maybe a super soldier baby, we're not really sure, but at the end, everyone's kind of like, we're not sure if it's a super soldier or not, but Scully's pregnancy, we have no idea how it happened. Mulder seems to believe that it's not his baby, and I'm still not sure if these two have even had sexual intercourse with each other, but at the very end of the season, they finally kiss on the lips, and it's a prolonged kiss. It's what we've been waiting 8 years for, and I feel like the series doesn't really build up to it or earn it properly. This is a relationship that, before I started watching this series, I always believed that this was one of those things where they start off not liking each other, then they slowly become partners and they respect each other, and then after that they slowly become involved in a romantic relationship. And we have been seeing jealous Scully moments as far back as season 1, whenever that lady from Scotland Yard was dancing with Mulder and Scully kind of had jealous face going on. We've been seeing that since season 1, so I was 100% expecting these two to slowly and organically, that's important, become a couple. I was not expecting them to slowly not organically eventually lead up to them kissing after 8 years of knowing each other. There's really no build up to it. It's just like, okay, since Mulder's not going to be in the show anymore and Scully's going on paternity leave, we're going to have these two kiss each other. And I'm not sure if Scully is going to be leaving the show. I'm pretty sure the way they've kind of set it up here that Mulder will be leaving, but they kind of set that up like 3 or 4 episodes before the finale, and then he keeps showing up anyway. So he may come back in season 9 even though he's not a member of the X-Files anymore. And I haven't even gotten around to talking about Agent Reyes. I want to say this is a really dense season. Even though there's a lot of it that doesn't really make a lot of sense, there's a lot more here for me to talk about than I feel like there has been for the last several seasons of this show. So while Agent Mulder is coming back from being abducted by aliens, we've also got this other agent in the Bureau called Agent Monica Reyes. And she's a very interesting character. She's probably my favorite character in the show at this point. She is kind of sort of the new Scully. Or not the new Scully, she's sort of the new Mulder. So at the very end of this season, spoiler, Mulder's not in the X-Files anymore, and Scully is taking paternity leave, and she might end up not coming back to the X-Files. We're not really sure. It's kind of left hanging. So at the very end, you've got Agent Doggett, who's been in the X-Files for a year now, and then you've got Agent Reyes, who is, she investigates like supernatural and demonic killings and stuff like that, and she tells Scully, basically, if Mulder is a full-on believer and Scully was a full-on skeptic, Agent Reyes is kind of like an agnostic for aliens. She wants to believe that there might be something out there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she does believe. Or she thinks there might be stuff out there, but she doesn't necessarily think that this thing that we're dealing with right now is alien-related. And that's kind of her approach to this whole thing. And there's about half a season here where we've got 4 different agents kind of floating around, and it's getting a little confusing. We're trying to keep up with all these guys, and you're not sure, okay, is Monica Reyes going to be just a one-time character who only shows up once, or is she going to be kind of a recurring character, kind of like Skinner and Kirsch or something like that? And she ends up being a recurring character, and from what I can tell, she's going to be in season 9 throughout the whole series. But she is a very interesting character. It's hard for me to explain. She's kind of sort of strange, not in a mean way. Like, every time she's on screen, she'll say something, and her delivery is very peculiar, and I enjoy it. She's very amusing, but it's hard for me to describe it. Like, there's one point at the very end of the season where she and Scully have gone off and hidden somewhere where there's, like, no human life at all, so that they can deliver Scully's baby, and then she says, all we need now is recordings of whale songs, like whales talking to each other, and then she starts making a whale noise, and I'm just busting out laughing, and I feel like the series wants this to be funny. It's not a situation of it's unintentionally funny, and I really enjoyed this character. I felt like she was an interesting addition to the show, and if you're going to get rid of Scully and Mulder, I feel like she's a good balance for Doggett, where Doggett, by now, he's seen a year of supernatural stuff, and he doesn't entirely believe in aliens or stuff like that. He doesn't believe in demons or that sort of thing, but he does somewhat believe that there is a government conspiracy going on, and he does believe, okay, there's some stuff out there, because he saw Billy Miles get killed. Oh, I haven't even talked about Billy Miles. I don't know if I'm going to get to that in this video. He saw Billy Miles get killed, and then he sees him come back. So, like, there's stuff that Doggett has seen. So, I guess we'll see in season 9, is he going to be like Scully of old, and even though he's seen stuff like this, he's going to pretend like he hasn't, he's going to say that it doesn't exist, or is he going to kind of sort of believe in stuff like this, and then Agent Reyes is going to be like the old Mulder, and she's going to be pulling him even further into the weird and unusual and say, there's even more stuff out here that we should be investigating that's even weirder than what you're willing to expect or what you're willing to believe in. So I felt like she was a very welcome addition to this crew, and I feel like if this series had lasted a few more years, these characters, Doggett and Reyes, would have warmed up to the audiences. I feel like audiences were probably really rioting whenever Mulder left at the end of season 7, and they just really weren't happy that he was gone from the show. But I feel like if they had just sat down and if they had just watched this season, I think they would have come to like Doggett, and I think they would have come to like Agent Reyes eventually. They probably had just completely lost their minds by the time Reyes was introduced, because by that point Mulder hadn't been in the show for like half a season. But I feel like if this series had gone on for like another 3 or 4 seasons or something like that, then I feel like these characters would have become more ingrained in the series, and people would have liked them a little bit more. It could have been kind of sort of like Doctor Who, where the series went on for like 30 or 40 years, and every time an actor wanted to leave the show, they would just say, okay, he regenerates into a new version of himself. And that was how they were able to keep the show going for so long. It could have been the same way with the X-Files, where it's like, okay, Agent Scully is pregnant, now she's going to leave the show, and we're going to have a new character kind of join the X-Files. X-Files. And maybe eventually that would have gotten old. It would have been like, okay, how many agents does the Bureau have to waste on this department that nobody actually believes in? But I feel like it was believable the way they were able to get Doggett and Reyes into the X-Files by the end of the season. I felt like that worked. Maybe I'm alone there because, like I said, everyone else in the world likes the earlier seasons of the X-Files, and I hate those seasons. And this season, I felt like was a lot more interesting than some of the earlier seasons. Like I said, there's still episodes in the season that don't make a lot of sense, like the episode that tries to deal with Doggett's son, and how there's this weird demon that's going around possessing people, and that demon thing is never explained. We don't know what it does or why it does what it does, stuff like that. There's still episodes in this season that don't make a whole lot of sense, but overall, I enjoyed this season a lot more than I've enjoyed some of the earlier seasons that I've talked about. So those are my thoughts on X-Files Season 8. I have one more season to talk about, and then the movie from 2008. And then by the time I get those videos up, I would say that the revival will be already on. And so I'll get to talking about the revival at some point after I finish talking about the last season and the movie. So those are my thoughts on this season. What did you guys think of this video? If you liked it, let me know in the comments below. Also, I encourage you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the future with some other videos. Have a great rest of the day.